Hi everyone, this is Dr. Raquel Butler from Integrated Veterinary Therapeutics.
And Sophie Vandenberg from Equine Postulate. And we welcome you to the Equine Functional Posture Podcast, your ultimate source for insights into the influence of functional posture on biomechanics, health, and overall well-being of horses.
Whether you're a seasoned equestrian, an equine professional, or simply a horse enthusiast, this podcast is designed to help you understand the critical aspects of functional posture.
Tune in each week as we discuss practical tips, delve into expert interviews, and explore the latest research in the impact of functional posture on equine anatomy, physiology, movement, and more.
Let's create a world where we empower our horses to be in a mental, emotional, and physical balance. Hi everyone, welcome to today's episode. We are talking about the functional posture team today. So what are some of the people in the team that we're going to discuss, Soph?
So we're going to be touching lightly over the roles that you and your horse play, as well as other people that are outside your daily stuff, such as your nutritionist, the vet, trainers, body workers, saddle and bit fitters, as well as the role that your trainer plays and how they all tie together to make sure that you're getting everything you need.
Yeah, so it's as always, we're packing a lot into an episode, and the realization is that each of these important people on your team, we could talk about each area for days and weeks, and our plan is in coming podcasts, to talk to saddle fitters and bit fitters and nutritionists and vets, and how all of these people play a role in maintaining your horse's functional posture. So the first one we're going to talk about is ourselves, or you. You as the horse owner. You could be just the horse owner, but you could be the horse owner, rider, trainer. You might have multiple hats. And, one of the things I've learned about that is how my thoughts and my energy influence the horse. So Mel Fleming specifically, like I talk about her a lot because she's been a big influence to me. But, she has really highlighted to me, if I'm not grounded, so if I'm kind of feeling a bit, I've got 20 minutes today and I'm in a hurry, then that has a huge impact on my horse. So my mental state, and also my physical state. So such as, like, if I'm really up, or I'm really braced, or I'm really holding with one hand when I'm riding, when I'm doing my groundwork, and how that's going to translate into my horse, and that can even be the way I lead my horse, has an impact on their posture.
Yeah.
And since I've become more aware of that, it's amazing how I can influence horses. So my own horses, but clients' horses, like they can be really up, and if I regulate myself physically, mentally, emotionally,
Be grounded. Yeah,
then I can just like shift that horse in a second, like posturally, and mentally, which has a massive impact. What about your experience with that and how you've influenced your horses?
I've definitely seen that there's a really big correlation, between how I'm feeling and how the horse feels safe with me as well. Definitely, I find that when I am consistent and sometimes slower in my actions, if I can slow myself down, the horse is always making a prediction about, what they expect you to do, and whether they, they think they're going to have maybe a positive or a less positive experience with you. And my ability to be consistent, to be in, and to be in my body so that I'm giving the same cue for the same reason, rewarding for the same outcome, and the horse understands that they're not going to be caught out getting, a less desirable result from, offering me something that I wanted and, I did or I didn't release, and that for horses can be very stressful because you're tied in a limbo where you don't know what you're going to get from your person. So it's a really big skill to be constantly self-aware of your line of communication, whether that's, you're somebody who does liberty work or you're actually leading them physically with, a piece of tack or the way that you touch them. And, we always say the idea is that you have a horse who's emotionally regulated enough that you can do things out of order or unpredictably, and you have a solid foundation to absorb that well.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's times when you have to do things more structurally for horses who need that at a certain time. So yeah, I've definitely found that to be one of the biggest things, to be very consistent.
Yeah, consistency, especially in your feel and like working with people in their groundwork and things. Like often we don't even know that, we're holding tension in a certain area, or that we're being a little inconsistent in our feel. Like you don't even recognize how your body position is influencing the posture of your horse. Yep. And the other thing you touched on there was how we touch our horse. And I think that's really important, because where we touch our horse, whether we, scratch them, we want that to be quite a positive experience. And I really hate the slapping touch, the patting, slapping.
Yep.
Because horses don't do that to each other, like unless they're kicking each other or having, a conversation. Like it's always scratching, nuzzling, muzzling. And so I think that's really important, like how we touch our horse is going to influence how they respond, and then that's going to impact their posture. And the other thing that you also made me think about was how we talk about our horse. So how we talk about our horse sets up a frequency, and a what do I want to call it? Like it sets up like an
expectation.
Yeah, an expectation and a physical pattern in our bodies. Like if we're always saying, "Oh, she's such a bitch," like, "Oh, she's so stupid," or so arrogant, or like putting all the human emotions on, so dumb, or so stubborn, bitchy mare, can't learn. Like we're just kind of setting up that pattern with our horses. And another thing, like keep coming back to Mel, but like another thing she said to me was, how can we do things that influence our horse's posture or whatever in the most loving way?
Yes.
And think of them in that way. It really changes like your horse's response to you.
Yes. And I think it also changes your experience of your horse, which means that I think most people, particularly amateurs, they're looking to enjoy the experience they have with their horse. And it's worthwhile exploring, appreciating what you have in the moment, not only for the effect it'll have for your posture and the patience you have for them as they are also trying to do their best, that they can in the moment, but for yourself, having a positive experience is also important because it gives you, the encouragement you need to keep going, even when things sometimes aren't exactly what you want them to be.
Yeah, and like, we're then going to have that influence on our horse's mental and emotional capacity, and that brings us to like our horse being part of that functional posture team. So, like some things that are from a horse perspective that are going to influence their posture, which obviously we've already talked about a number in a number of podcasts. But even their paddock dynamics, like how they're spending their time in their paddock, whether they're comfortable, relaxed, stressed, sleeping, any of those kind of aspects.
Yeah.
And yeah, like what else do you think from a horse perspective?
Well, if you've touched on the mental and emotional parts, and they have things that they need to meet, as a species specific requirement. So those are things like, are they getting, like you said, laying down, are they getting enough sleep? Are they meeting their, need for the right kind of social experience? And also, are they getting, this touches in the nutrition area, but are they getting the right amount of forage? Are they meeting all of their needs? Because you can't out train or out posture when your horse doesn't have their inherent needs met. And so another thing that can also affect them is their physical state. So that might include that all their soft tissue and their joints, their metabolic health, scars, a history of injuries, restrictions, or their own kind of issues they might deal with, which could be, hypermobility, lordosis, malformations, things like that are going to have an influence on the horse. What are your experiences seeing those in horses day to day?
Yeah, I mean, if a horse has a sore back or a sore hock or some other joint is uncomfortable, then that's going to have a massive influence on their posture. And we will talk more about specifically scars, because
Yes.
that for me is an area that I'm really passionate about, and they have a massive impact on posture. But yeah, like the other aspect, I'm not sure if I think you did mention it, but like actually we touch on it in nutrition.
Yes.
But we could probably just jump over to there, is like metabolic things like PSSM and Cushing's within the horse, because if you don't have those horses nutrition right, like I have Jelly and I suspect he
Yes.
has myofibrillar myopathy, and like I can see a change in his muscles, within half a day if his nutrition is not correct.
Yes.
And so I can train him all I like, but if I don't have his nutrition appropriate, then he is not able to give me the posture that is optimal for his, the strength in what I'm asking him to do, the comfort.
Yep.
Like it's crazy, the difference that I see in his posture. If that's not working properly for him. So that's super important. Yeah.
Absolutely. And of course, that also touches on the fact that there's the individual aspect of the horse, including their age,
Yeah.
their breed, so as well as their ability to recover from things. So with Jelly's muscle condition, he might have a little bit of exercise intolerance, and things like that, as well as how they respond to training. And all of those things play a really big impact on, and they're all really interconnected. Age and joint comfort are going to have links between them, nutrition and metabolic health, scars and their ability to recover or their response to training. It's incredibly interconnected, all of them. And he might have, you can have more than one issue that's going to affect us as well. You're balancing things. And sometimes, I know you've said with Jelly, you're balancing the fact that his strength and his posture has changed his life. But at the same time, sometimes that you could be, you're balancing how much can I get done before I impact another part of his body. So it's a bit of a balancing for some horses and owners.
Yeah, and balancing that with the mental, emotional capacity,
Exactly.
because, Jelly might prefer to go jumping, and I'm like, sorry, dude, you need to do, a bit more functional posture work before we
Yep.
can go have that sort of fun. So sometimes those things dictate what you can do with your horse, and keeping them in a posturally happy place. The other thing that comes into that, like with your horse and nutrition, is the feeding positions. And like we're going to do an episode talking specifically about the influence of those on posture. But, your horse is in the paddock for maybe 22 hours a day, depending, maybe longer, or they might be in a stable for half of that or whatever. But the positions they're standing in over that period of time can have a massive influence on their functional posture. So I'm not going to go into it because we are going to do a whole episode on it, but the position of their feed can have a massive influence on their posture.
Absolutely. And of course, within nutrition, you have those individual parts of a nutritional profile. So your amino acids, your energy, calories, your carbohydrates, fats, all the different things that the horses need, as well as the kind of food the horses need. So, they need forage, they need to chew a lot in order to produce saliva, which is alkaline, and that has an impact on the rest of the body, and the prevention of ulcers, saliva coming down into the stomach.
Yeah, and also will have a massive impact on posture.
Exactly. Yeah. And what are the things that you find that you found with PSSM for Jelly and his nutrition?
Oh, so he needs quite a lot of vitamin E, magnesium, selenium, amino acids. So like he needs it at a specific time. So, I've found that feeding him right before I ride him or work him has been beneficial. And it took me a long time to figure it all out. And like they're probably the protein. So having enough protein right when I work him, are the key things for him, and just that timing of feed is really important. So, but the other aspect of that is to know that you need to feed a horse in a certain way, you generally need to have a diagnosis. So the vet is a really important part of your team. And I've seen cases where, having that diagnosis really changes the plan, the expectation, the outcome. Being able to monitor the recovery is super important. So like if they have an injury, for instance. But the other side of that is if you're purchasing a horse or you have a horse and you're like, I just can't get this thing, like maybe it's what's a more vet thing, maybe they're struggling with their hind end power, okay, and you investigate and they've got suspensory issues in their hind end, which by the way has a massive connection to the pelvis. So that's not, if you get a suspensory diagnosis, you need to look at the entire horse.
Yeah.
But knowing that means that you can understand the posture, the behavior, the challenges, and you can also understand the recovery and the expectations. And that comes down to like when you purchase your horse as well. Like if you get a baseline set of x-rays, can be really, really valuable, because then okay, I'm dealing with some mild arthritis in the hocks. There's some indications that we could be heading towards kissing spine, so I really need to focus on that posture. Or there's some something else there that is, it doesn't rule out everything, having a pre-purchase exam, but and I've certainly seen a lot of horses where it didn't rule out a lot of things, but it's still a great foundation to have
With all of those things. So coming to the idea of, investigative or your diagnostics, if you start thinking about the things that are going to also have an effect, you can consider the farrier, thinking about the horse's feet, their maintenance, hoof comfort, angles, pathologies such as white line disease, thrush. Yep, there's just so many things that have an impact. And so having a farrier who is qualified, who understands your horse's needs, and also, the routine that you're on. Does your horse need to have adaptations such as a shorter cycle or a different type of shoeing package if you're using shoes? Does your horse need regular thrush treatment, or are they struggling with another condition such as canker where you do need to get a vet involved? So when you think about the aspect of a team, those people in your circle also need to be able to communicate and talk about the issues that you're having. So it's not just you and your horse going to each individual person, having them communicate and work to solve the issues that you might be having is also very important. And to have a collaborative group of people who all, everyone really feels like our outcome is to create a good state of being
Functional
physically.
posture for the
A
horse.
functional posture course, big part, and to have an outcome for the horse that's positive, as best you can mentally but physically as well.
Yeah, and like just touching back on the farrier there, your shoeing or trimming interval is so important for creating that functional posture, So if you want to create change in your horse's posture relating to the feet, it needs to be less than 5 weeks. And sometimes
Absolutely.
even if you're trimming, you could trim every couple of weeks and just touch them up in between the trimmer. And that makes a massive difference in the posture. And the other aspect also there is farriers and trimmers that watch horses move. I think that's and they look at more than the foot. So working with a farrier, like you said, a farrier or trimmer who's willing to work with the team, but also one that's willing to look at the whole horse, so that, they're looking at and thinking about how that hoof posture influences the body and how the body is influencing the hoof posture. And then, there's a farrier I'm working with at the moment, and like he's thinking about what he can do to help the work that I'm doing. And I'm doing training with the horse as well as body work with the horse. And so, he's watching the horse. He watched me do the groundwork session with the horse last time. So he's really looking at how that horse moves and thinking about how he can help the movement through the feet, and how that influence is going. The feet can't be thought of as a separate entity. we need to put them as a part of the entire horse.
The whole body. And touching on that, you've obviously had a bodywork to farrier relationship really recently. And when you come into bodywork, there's obviously just there's a huge it's a bag of worms. You could just go into so many different modalities, everything from craniosacral, massage, chiro, osteo, lots of different things, and lots of different levels of qualification. So there might be people who regularly see your horse, and people you take your horse to, a couple of times a year if they need a different kind of work. And there's also the regularity. So the regularity is obviously going to depend on your horse's workload, the physical state they're in, and the kind of restrictions they have or issues, and whether you can work with that, mobilizations, activations, etc., or if you need somebody else to come in and help you with that. Do you find the same thing?
Yeah, 100%. Like, I treat horses that have multiple different types of body workers. So they might have me occasionally when I'm in an area, and then they have a number of other body workers of different qualifications. And I think the important thing there is your body workers' qualifications. So recently, one of my clients is moving, and so she said, "Oh, don't worry, he's going to see a bodywork specialist." And I was like, "Oh, what's a bodywork specialist? Like, I've never heard of that." And, I could only find one qualification on her page. And it's like, don't just take the words, don't just take the title. Like, actually look at people's qualifications and ask them and get an insight into, are they progressive in their learning? Are they, what's their knowledge of anatomy? Because I think that is the difference between an amazing body worker and, a more, an earlier body worker. Like that anatomy, like I'm still learning, that all of those connections, because it just, it's insane how like it's pieces of the puzzle. So yeah, ask your body worker, like, "Oh, what's your qualifications? How long you been doing it for?" Different things like that, because a body worker who's progressive will be more than happy to tell you. Like, they want to tell you
Yep.
the that they're progressive and that they
want you to be involved in
qualified and
understanding.
insured, and all of that. So, you know, it's not like it used to be. We used to have a lot of unqualified people at times doing inappropriate things to horses. It's not the same. It has improved a lot. But a lot of people still don't ask the questions. And I look at bodyworkers' Facebook pages, and I often can't find their qualifications. And so, yeah, ask the question. Your bodyworkers so impactful in your posture. If you're struggling to improve your horse's posture and there's no obvious lameness, then, you know, getting a body worker out, getting multiple body workers, everyone comes from a different perspective, and investigating that, because every time I'm struggling with something with my horse, like a certain movement, there is always a physical reason for that. Like, it's never a behavioral reason. They don't want to move that leg away from me, or they don't want to pick up that leg, or they don't want to do the pick up the canter lead on that side or something like that. Like, there's always a reason.
Absolutely. Yep. And coming out of bodyworker, we can also consider other members of the team, such as your saddle fitter. And that is another one where there's been a huge amount of development, and the quality of information, considerations, research that's gone into saddle fitting has exploded, you know, in the last 5 to 10 years, especially the last 5 years. And, you know, the qualifications that people can have with their saddle fitting have also improved as well. So, you know, there's, and that's another one where there's a really big influence of the horse, because the individual horse in the moment, you know, as you're starting a journey, in an ideal world, you'd fit your horse from the very beginning, but you are looking for your horse to change and improve their posture, lifts the back and fills the back and the wither pockets, and allows them to actually move with better stability, but also more motion. So there's just a lot to consider there. What are some things you always think about when it comes to saddles?
Yeah, I mean, I've studied saddle fitting, and I did some saddle fitting for a while, and pulled my hair out about 50 times, because maybe hundreds of times, because I realized the saddles I was trying to fit were actually never going to fit, you know. And that's a challenge, because you have an owner who's attached to a saddle, or they've just purchased a saddle, or they can't afford a new saddle, or any of those things, and that can have an impact. But some of the common things are, like, if they're really too tight in the wither pocket, you know, that's where we want the horse to live, just behind the wither there, where that change is. And so that'll prevent the horse from using their thoracic sling. It'll prevent them from being able to lift through their back and engage through the base of the neck. I see a lot of ponies, you know, with that saddle imprint. And not everyone understands what that is. So, you know, if you see a saddle imprint on your horse, you need to get your saddle checked, because it shouldn't leave an imprint on your horse's back. So that's probably a big one. And the other aspect is to consider your girth type, placement relative to the horse and relative to the saddle. Because girth comfort can also have a big impact on the sternum, the pectorals, the fall in motion. And so that's another kind of area. And you should be looking at getting your saddle fitted or checked like every 3 to 6 months. So, and if everything's kind of going well, like if your horse has had a big change, such as they've been turned out, they've put on weight, they've lost weight, your training has significantly increased, maybe they've had a positive change in posture. If you leave that too long, I've seen horses where they've had a positive change in posture, they've called the saddle fitter. Saddle fitter hasn't been able to come for another 2 to 4 weeks. We've lost that positive change in posture. Whereas if you just kind of got them booked in every 3 months, especially if you're serious, you're riding a lot, you're just going to prevent, it's the same with your bodywork, your farrier, your vet, like you're just going to prevent the negative impacts on posture.
Absolutely.
So important.
And speaking of fitting, the bit fitter, this is something that's, I didn't really even consider until maybe the last 5 years when I was at Equine Science. I really honestly never really thought anything beyond you just fit it to the width of the mouth and, you choose your bit based on what you're trying to achieve, yeah.
The horse seems to do what you want to ask it with the least resistance.
Yep. Yeah, training bit for a young horse, elevate, the highest form is going to be to, double bridle, et cetera, but there's obviously everything has changed with more information and understanding, and everything from you've got bitted options, bitless, bridle free options, and there's lots of things to consider, such as the comfort of the tongue and the bar. I've seen a couple of gnarly tongue scars, and a couple that have come off the track. They've obviously worn a tongue tie, and I did know that they wore a tongue tie and they had really bad tongue restrictions and a big scar around it. So even if that scar didn't come from a bit, you're gonna have, it's in a place that it's very susceptible and vulnerable to a lot of pressure, something that's already painful, or a place you would want to be promoting circulation, not having an influence on it. I know you've done your dissections with Sharon. She has an awesome exercise about showing the connection of the tongue.
Yeah, so Sharon May Davis really showed me the impact of the bit on stride length, specifically to the hind end. And so, yeah, we do an exercise where, and I do it also with my equine students, and what always shocks them is the level of pressure I put on the tongue, which is actually so slight. Like it's just the pressure of my finger. It's barely, let alone like, me pulling on the reins. Like it's just my finger on the tongue. And when I see their faces, so they're moving the hind leg and they're feeling that motion of the hind leg forward and back.
So this is in dissection. This is the horses lying down on the table, and the student rows the hind leg, moving it back and forward.
It moves the hind leg. And what you'll see is they'll have like a pretty smooth action happening in their body. And then I put the slightest pressure on the tongue. And then you see this like sudden kind of jerkiness happening in the forward and backward motion. And I've seen this in practice, so with horses moving. So a few years ago, there was a lesson on, it was at CSU, doesn't matter, but, there was a student in the lesson and her horse was jig jogging and, pulling, and it was in a gag, and the reins, I think, were on the second or third, maybe the second ring, I think. Couldn't go straight, couldn't do the canter poles, stride length really short. Professional rider got on, just took it off the gag ring, so put it just onto the snaffle ring. Obviously a lot better hands, a lot more confident, not as nervous in the situation. That horse's stride length increased by a foot at least.
Wow. Yeah.
And it went straight down the line between the canter poles. Like I was standing behind it, so I could see how it went before and after. So that's one influence of the bit. But the other thing, like you mentioned, tongue scars, and I had a horse, I've had a couple now with like significant scarring. One I reckon nearly 50% of its tongue had been like severed. Massive tongue scar, short little choppy stride, really uncomfortable. They said always, after any event, he'd pull up really sore. He'd never, wasn't comfortable. Worked on his tongue, like the actual scar, very carefully, keeping my fingers out of the way. And the difference, like in his hind end and his movement, and he could go and be ridden and not pull up sore, like it was phenomenal. And it never returned to that because we'd released the tension. I think I treated the tongue specifically maybe 3 times, and then I just check it in any tight area. So it is, we really have to consider that that tongue, the mouth, is the most sensitive area of the entire horse. Like they feel with their vibrissae, what we know as the whiskers, they're feeling with those. They've got all of their senses there. You know, the tongue is really highly innervated. We've got the connections of the hyoid to the jaw. There's so many connections to the rest of the body. Like it's so important. I just can't reiterate that enough.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've ridden bitless, bridleless. They have their own pros and cons as well, which you need to consider. And the rider's hands are also going to be really important in that.
Yeah,
bit.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
hopefully at some stage we'll get a bit fitter on to really go into that in more detail, because you know, I think we do a lot of things that we've just done historically and traditionally, and we accept a lot of discomfort behavior relating to the bit without actually considering the action comfort of the bit and the horse physically themselves, like what restrictions they carry in their jaw, tongue, etc.
Just before we move on from that, it's also worth considering another part of your team is the dentist.
Oh yeah, we didn't have that on our list. So
No.
important.
So, and of course, another one coming around is that, again, in the last, number of years, there's been also a change in the levels of qualification that people can have to be a dentist. And of course, if you're a non-vet, you can't legally use a sedation without a vet present to do that work. And then, of course, you might have horses who have different pathologies, everything from hooks to really, missing teeth, cavities, caries, incisor issues, or EORTH, the equine orthodontic
Absorptive.
orthoclastic syndrome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's just so many things to consider in the mouth and a lot of issues. I remember being at uni. This was a really big, I think this had an impact on me thinking about teeth, and having the vet dentist come in and do a demonstration. And she had a skull with her where a horse was never eating, and they'd done every test under the sun for his metabolism, etc. And they'd said, oh, he's had his teeth done, etc., etc. And when that horse was euthanized for being underweight, they found in his skull that his very last tooth had a really, really big hook on it that was just too far back to reach, and he wasn't very good with his teeth. And so he was a horse who would have who really needed to have a sedation and a full mouth inspection to be able to find that. And it had essentially created a giant hole behind his bottom last molar with a great big infection, and dent in the bone behind those teeth, because he wouldn't eat because of that pain. So that was a really big lesson in the fact that horses have different needs. Some horses, sure, an ordinary dental, but it's very important to have a mirror inspection and have someone have a really close look, looking for caries, packed food. We expect a lot of the mouth, and we should be caring for it.
And the mouth is so integral in the horse's posture, so recently I had my horse's teeth done, and another client who's done the functional posture course had her horse's teeth done. And one of the things that I was the proudest of was the Jelly, who I'm working with. His mouth was the best. Now, he's always had a good mouth, but the vet kind of kept saying, God, he's got such a good mouth. And I feed him a lot of food up high. I feed him out of a lot of hay nets, so I was a little bit worried. And he's doing postural work, right? Like my focus for him is posture. My other client, whose horse has kissing spine, hock arthritis, stifle arthritis, hoof imbalances, numerous things, but she's been doing postural work now for over 12 months. The dentist was like, I cannot believe the balance of your horse's mouth. So the mouth will influence posture, but the posture will influence the mouth, because the teeth are constantly growing. So, and I also saw it with Mooney a few years ago. I did 6 months of postural work with him, and his teeth were the best they've been since I've
Wow.
owned him. And so that was the point at which I started to think, this postural stuff seems to be very beneficial for the horse's health.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm glad you thought of the dentist, because that's it's integral to posture, like TMJ balance, integral to posture, proprioception, all of those things.
Absolutely. Yep.
So yeah, then we just come to the trainer and the type of training that your horse is doing, which kind of relates to the postural work, because it depends whether your focus, like what your focus actually is in your training. So whether your focus is posture, or whether your focus is doing specific movements for a specific discipline, or getting the head and neck in a certain position, which hopefully we're moving away from that and recognizing the head and neck is a product of how the horse's posture is. It's not something we should be, it shouldn't be the focus. We need to look at the whole horse.
Yeah.
But the other impacts of training could be the terrain that you train on. So whether you're always on soft, like you're always on sand, or you're always on hard, like that's going to impact soft tissues, joints.
Yep.
What else is in there?
Your the intensity and variation of the exercises that you're doing. So you might be doing a certain type of sport. So you're either you might be doing cross training, long, slow distance, intensity, jumping, and those are all things that are going to influence the body simply because of the demand upon the tissues and the exercise you're asking them to do. And so thinking about, really with that intensity and the type of training, before you do the training, what is the outcome that I'm looking for? Like,
Yeah.
if you're trying to achieve something with functional posture, it's going to look a little bit different to you if you're trying to, take your horse.
Height of a jump or something.
Exactly. And so it's worth, we talked about this in the early episodes, but it's really like a key pillar of the functional posture is that functional posture training is not a form of training. It's about the place that you want to have the horse in, carrying themselves with comfort, mobility, stability, and flexibility that sets them up before you take them into a discipline. So in every discipline, you need to move your limbs and have impulsion and comfort and lift. And the core stability of the horse is so valuable in I can't think of a single discipline where it doesn't make a massive difference. And we're all aiming for it and looking for it. So the functional posture training comes before all of that work. And it just, everybody that comes through the EF.
Part of like ongoing.
Yeah. And ongoing, and your ability to observe and see those things changes how you're going to do stuff. And everybody who comes through the course says, this has made every other part of our life easier when it comes to going out, going for a trail ride and all that. Yeah.
And you need to think about, does your trainer and your training align with what the health and well-being of your horse? Because I've seen horses that have had a lesson and I've treated them the day after and they're so sore. And so for me, that's not optimizing posture. You might be sore when you first start something a little bit, obviously if we start going to the gym, but horses have a really inherent athletic ability. They don't, they can withstand a lot more athletic activity than we can. And so if they're getting that sore from a lesson, then I would say they embrace in a lot of that lesson.
Yes.
So we really want to think about, the philosophies of our training and whether that aligns, with our horse's functional postural health and well-being, and also where our rest is within our training session. So rest within the session, especially related to learning new things, and rest days after a session, because I've also heard of very high-level trainers that are training the horses hard every single day. And glycogen, which is like the energy product, or sorry, the substrate to provide energy for your horse's muscles, needs to be replenished.
Yep.
If you utilize that, it can take up to 72 hours. We also get micro damage in the muscles. And if you don't allow that to recover and you're just letting, that micro damage is just slowly building, then all of a sudden you wonder, why did my horse do the tendon? Why does my horse have kissing spine? Why does my horse have sacroiliac dysfunction? Why is my horse resisting? And it's just they didn't get enough rest. And when you have a horse that's in comfort, in functional posture, like, you don't need to train them heaps. They maintain their fitness super well.
Yeah.
So I took Jelly to a competition recently. I did not train the obstacles 50 million times. I literally did, I can count on one hand the number of obstacle training sessions I did with him. I focused on the techniques that I needed. So I knew that I had the commands that I was asking him. And I'd only repeat them 2 to 3 times. Like once I was like, yep, he's got it. Yep, he's got it. He can functionally do it. I didn't need to repeat it 50 million times. He's not that stupid. And his body's, if he's functional and comfortable, he can easily do it. So, the last thing that we want to talk about is your influences. So it's an interesting one, this, and we've kind of left it to last because
Yes.
It's something that sometimes people don't even realize that they have. But obviously a big one with that is what discipline you're involved in. So there's a lot of different pressures, expectations. You get rewarded for certain things. It might be speed in a barrel race. It might be hitting the ball in a polo game. But in a dressage test, it's the execution of movements and it's subjective based on the judge's opinions.
Yes.
So that's going to have a big influence on the way on all of these other things.
Yeah.
What other things influences that you might not realize are impacting you?
So that might be your closest acquaintances within your horse community. So that includes your friends, people you ride with or that you talk with, especially in Facebook groups. I see a lot of like friendships and people who know each other on socials, and so that the kind of things that they experience and that they share with you are going to have an impact on the way that you view your horse and view the issues that you have, the way that you think about something that your horse might do or give you or doesn't give you, and you want your horse to do something. And so the advice that you get from the people that are around you might shape the way that you're going to come to that problem. So, I've seen the most incredible inclusion of people in some spaces, and they've made a massive positive change for their horse because they've had people around them. And then in other spaces, better things might be still filtering into certain communities, new ways of doing things.
Kind of pressure.
Yeah. And of course, you also have the influence of the way you view your horse's breed. So maybe your relationship with their breeder, and they might tell you things about your horse like, oh, he's going to be this way or that way. And there's just so many things that we're told all the time, or things that are reinforced as law in the horse community. And coming to horses a bit later actually in life, sometimes you see things and then they don't make sense, but they are common knowledge and
Commonly accepted
and seen as normal, or it's just a no-brainer, things that you don't even question, that are open to improvement. Things are ready to change, and in certain places they're shifting. So there's a lot of things there, and also the idea that there are a lot of competitive people out there who are making an income from horses as well. It's a lot to consider. And also the fact that most amateur people don't have an endless supply of money. And so it is true that horses cost And time and all of these things we've spoken about, they do take time and they do cost money. And it's just, yeah, something to consider, that making the most of the resources that you have can be powerful for you and your horse.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that, there's no training method or philosophy that is the be all and end all of everything. Like I am constantly looking at lots of different training methods, and from an anatomical, biomechanical, horse perspective, like thinking about, yeah, I like this, I don't like that, like, this makes sense to me, this doesn't make sense to me. And as you increase your knowledge, especially of anatomy and biomechanics, like it really shifts your understanding of different training philosophies. But the thing that I would say is, if something does not feel right for you and your horse, and you have a question about your horse, you think, no, that just shouldn't look like that, it shouldn't feel like that, then don't stop asking the question, and don't believe your friends, family, trainers, whoever, vets, I don't even care if they're professionals, whatever. If you know and you feel that there is something not right with your horse, then keep searching, because I've had many people end up, talking to me, and I'm like, you're right. I can see that. I can see
Yep.
that in your horse's posture. Have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? Like, they're always right. So just stay strong and stay true to yourself and true to your horse. And yeah, just be, I guess, willing to kind of shrug off all the opinions, because everyone will have an opinion, some people stronger than others. And usually the strongest opinions are not often the most educated. So just, keep that in mind.
Yep.
Anything to finish off with?
Beautiful. Thanks everyone for joining us.
All right, well, thank you for joining myself, Dr. Raquel Butler, and Sophie Vandenberg today. Please subscribe to the Equine Functional Posture podcast so you don't miss our weekly episodes. And find the links to our socials in the comments, and remember to join the Equine Functional Posture course, which there's one coming up in November of this 2024 we're in right now, and create your transformation in your journey with your horse.
See you in the next